Chapter 220, The difficulty means that there's a way. After becoming a tycoon with assets in the tens of millions, Zhu Tui's back was very straight. However, this persistence only lasted for a day before it was broken by a Huang. Not only did Zhu Tui reward a Huang with 1,000,000 yuan, but he also took away 1.74 million yuans from his wallet for the 36 quantum computing tuber boards that a Huang had obtained. Although the number and cost were huge, in reality, the 36 quantum computing tuber boards were only half the size of a fingernail. It was f-king expensive. Zhu Tui had spent more than 1,000,000 on the level D energy restoration elixir that he had purchased from the genetic elixir center in the morning. In an instant, Zhu Tui's assets decreased from 12.2 million to 8.4 million. His assets had dropped from 10 million to million. The rich became the poor. However, he had to pay for his promise even if he was in tears. This made Zhu Tui remember something else. In the future, if he told a Huang to add more hardware, he had to confirm the price, and he also had to confirm the quantity. The lesson today was too profound. However, Zhu Tui's decision to exchange the level E energy restoration elixir for level D energy restoration elixirs was wise and correct. He immediately discovered the benefits during his training at night. His cultivation speed had increased again because he had switched to level D energy restoration elixir. Other than the fact that he had saved the time and mind power required to enter the meditative state, the most important reason for the increase, according to his analysis, was probably because the purity of his energy had increased. Zhu Tui could consume 7.5 bottles of level E energy restoration elixirs during his previous cultivation cycle. However, he could consume 90% of them after using level D energy restoration elixirs. He could only waste the remaining 10%. It was giving fats to him. Of course, it was not a complete waste. Zhu Tui's current size was still a little thin. Other than that, his cultivation time had become shorter. This was another form of cultivation speed increase. Previously, when he used 7.5 bottles of level E energy restoration elixirs, it took him about 2.5 hours in order for him to exhaust his mind power to the point that it was about to be depleted. The effect of the level D energy restoration elixir lasted for 3 hours. However, in less than 2 hours, Zhu Tui had consumed 90% of the energy in a bottle of level D energy restoration elixir. His mind power was also depleted. It should be because the purity of the level D energy restoration elixir was higher. The cultivation cycle saved Zhu Tui about 40 minutes. 40 minutes was not a long time, but it was still a considerable amount of time. The huge advantage of being ahead of others was actually because of this very small improvement. Over time, it has become a huge advantage. Time passed. In the blink of an eye, this was the 10th week that Zhu Tui had entered the Wuxia Genetic Evolution College. In 2 weeks, it would be 3 months since school started. The growth period of the freshmen in the 2137th batch of the Wuxia Genetic Evolution College was about to end. The end of the first year's growth period meant that 2 major events were about to unfold. The first was the traditional project of the Wuxia Genetic Evolution College competition for the Year 1 Longhu list. Secondly, the students' level assessment had to be reopened. Without a doubt, from the perspective of cultivation abilities. No matter how monstrous a freshman was before they entered the school or how powerful their abilities were after entering the school, in the end, you could only become a true genius and a true elite among the first-year students if you were on the rankings. In the eyes of the teachers and students of the Wuxia Genetic Evolution College, only those who made it onto the Longhu list were the true future elites. It was also because of this that the combat training class became unprecedentedly popular. There were also many students who challenged each other after class. Zhu Tui had become a popular candidate in the top 10 of the Year 1 Longhu list because he had participated in the actual combat exchange with India sector. That's right, only the top 10. Of course, as a flying sword warrior, Zhu Tui also had a group of fans. They believed that Zhu Tui would definitely become the first-year dragon. However, most of the students had only seen Zhu Tui display his strength from the live stream or from afar. They had to admit that Zhu Tui was very strong. However, it was impossible for them to admit that Zhu Tui could sweep through the freshmen of the Wuxia Genetic Evolution College. Since ancient times, there was no number one in literature, nor was there second in martial arts. In terms of individual strength, no genius was willing to admit that they were inferior to others before they fought. Therefore, many first-year students sent Zhu Tui private messages through various means. They wanted to spar with him. To put it bluntly, they wanted to find out his strength. They could also use Zhu Tui as a whetstone to sharpen their knife. Zhu Tui did not want to do something that would waste his time. He simply ignored it. However, Zhu Tui, who had once displayed his might in the combat arena, was extremely attractive to the freshmen. They thought of all kinds of moves. They wanted to have a battle with Zhu Tui before the competition for the Longhu list started. They wanted to find out what he was up to. However, Zhu Tui ignored them, so what could they do? The experience of Li Cheng, who had fought with Zhu Tui a month ago, became a learning experience for these freshmen. Zhu Tui, I'll offer you a bottle of Level E Energy Restoration Elixir. If you win, the item will be yours. Zhu Tui, we have a total of 6 students who have formed a team to challenge you. Each of us will offer a bottle of Level E Energy Restoration Elixir. As long as you win, these 6 bottles of Level E Energy Restoration Elixir will all belong to you. Zhu Tui, the 4 of us will form a team to challenge you. Each of us will offer 2 bottles. There are a total of 8 bottles. Zhu Tui could receive several such messages a day. Unfortunately, Zhu Tui was no longer the Zhu Tui from a month ago. A month ago, he was still worried about his cultivation funds. He did not even dare to eat 2 plates of braised pork. At that time, even a bottle of Level E Energy Restoration Elixir would be extremely attractive to him. However, Zhu Tui was completely different now. Although he had just fallen from a billionaire to a millionaire, he had a small capital of a few $1,000,000. He could order 10 plates of braised pork in one go. He could eat 2 plates and send 8 plates to Cheng Mo. 1. It was just a few bottles of Level E Energy Restoration Elixir. Zhu Tui could not afford to waste that time. If he really had the time, he might as well attempt clearing missions or go to Sea Paradise to earn some quick money. Therefore, while the other first-year students were putting their lives on the line for actual combat training and preparing for the Year 1 Longhu list, Zhu Tui spent most of his time leisurely flipping through books. That's right. With Zhu Tui's current reaction speed and mind power, he would be able to memorize the entire book in a few minutes. Of course, it was just memorizing. Whether or not he could understand and have his own ideas depended on his thoughts and wisdom. Other than that, he had to cultivate. It was worth mentioning that Zhu Tui had already begun to develop the 9th reaction type genetic base point according to Luo Shifeng's plan. Slowing down the development speed was a way to avoid serious life-threatening situations in the development of genetic base points. However, Zhu Tui still noticed that something was amiss. Compared to the 8th genetic base point, the 9th genetic base point was much more difficult to develop. The development of the 8th was completed in 3 to 4 days. The progress was very fast. However, Zhu Tui had been developing his 9th reaction speed type genetic base point for 4 consecutive days. Although the progress was not much every day, he should have succeeded in activating it according to the 8th genetic base point. Yet, in reality, Zhu Tui felt that his current development progress was still a little far away from activating the 9th genetic base point. The difficulty of activating the 9th reaction speed genetic base point was several times harder than the 8th. This was a good thing for Zhu Tui and Luo Shifeng. It meant their worship. The more difficult it was to activate the 9th reaction speed type genetic base point, the higher the possibility of forming a reaction speed type genetic chain and producing a genetic ability chain. This was not a wild guess. It was determined by the structure of the genetic ability chains that had been discovered in the Great Genetic Age for nearly 100 years. Zhu Tui and Luo Shifeng, who had had a brief exchange, were looking forward to this. However, in Luo Shifeng's words, additional possibilities represented risks. Therefore, the development process had to be slow. They could not be anxious. He had to stop immediately if he felt any discomfort during the development process. Actually, Zhu Tui was not anxious at all. He could afford to wait for a month or 2. The anxious one could only be Luo Shifeng, who had persisted for almost 30 years. Signing up for the special flying license was proof that Zhu Tui was not anxious at all. He had to put this on the agenda. Zhu Tui had registered online on Monday. It costs 120,000 yuans. It was a little expensive, but it was not worth mentioning to Zhu Tui, who had become a millionaire. After successfully registering, the first thing he learned were the various regulations, the countermeasures under special circumstances, the flight data parameters, and the various physical changes in the flight state. In short, it was theoretical learning. Theoretical learning was self-study. After he finished studying, he would have to take 2 different types of theory exams. There were a total of 200 questions, totaling 200 marks. He had to score above 195 points every time before he could pass the test and undergo the next stage of training. Zhu Tui was not a star student, but his mind power was extremely powerful. He could basically memorize theoretical knowledge. He scored full marks in both theoretical exams. In order not to affect the students' studies and training, the Wuxia Genetic Evolution College had scheduled the training for the special flying license after 6 in the afternoon. At the same time, it was also convenient for them to conduct night flight training. At 6 o'clock on Friday afternoon, Zhu Tui, who had skipped combat training once again, arrived at the special driving school located in the scenic forest area of the Wuxia Genetic Evolution College. The driving school instructor who received Zhu Tui had the surname Lin. He briefly checked Zhu Tui's written test results and his medical report. After registering, he gave Zhu Tui a sensor access pass. Go to the 117th simulation training chamber. Once you achieve a passing simulation training result, then you will undergo simulation flying training. After you accumulate 72 hours of simulation flying training, you can come to me to apply for actual driving training. After giving his instructions, Coach Lin stood up and was about to leave. He had already studied the rules thoroughly, but he quickly called out to Coach Lin.